apologize for not getting a podcast out for week one. Had some technical difficulties, and then I had to make a flight up to Philly for the Thursday night football game, Eagles versus Vikings, which I will get to later in the podcast. But today on the podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of recapping of some of the games, but in a different format. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of these 0-2 teams as well as some of these 2-0 teams. See what we think about it. Should we start hitting the panic button a little bit for the 0-2 teams? Because obviously the cliche of the statistics of teams starting out 0-2 and still making the playoffs. And then what are we going to talking about when we're talking about the 2-0 teams as well? Because are they going to be for real, or are they kind of frauds this early on in the season, still being 2-0? I mean, it's a good start for them, but what is there some tendencies in their games that we don't really like, stuff of that nature? So let's go ahead and start with the 0-2 teams here. I'm going to start out with the cliche statistic. Basically, going back to 1990, only 31 teams of the 270 that have started out 0-2 have made the postseason. So that is a clip of 11.5%. So a lot of these teams will not be making the playoffs. Some of them probably will, to kind of buck that trend a little bit. But let's start with the first game. Actually, we're gonna preface this. I'm recording on a Monday, so the Monday Night Football games tonight: the Saints versus the Panthers, and the Browns versus the Steelers. I have not seen just yet, but what I'm gonna do is kind of give you an idea of what I think is gonna happen in those games, and then I will kind of like put that together with the formatting here. Basically, Saints versus Panthers is going to be at the Panthers, so in Charlotte. I think the Saints are the better team here. The Panthers have started out a little bit shaky. Rookie quarterback, didn't like what I saw in the preseason with the Panthers as well. Bryce Young, a young guy. He looks kind of small out there, I'm not going to lie. I think he's a good processor of, the field and stuff of that nature. I think he can get through his reads and whatnot. I think he can throw the football. It's a matter of if that offensive line can protect him, which I haven't seen thus far in the season and in the preseason. As well as their offensive weapons are just not very good. Adam Thielen, a little bit long in the tooth there. Jonathan Mingo, a first-year guy. DJ Chark has been hurt. So I think the Saints have enough on defense to really put it to the Panthers tonight, and I think the Saints will come out 2-0 here. So I'll talk about them in the 2-0 kind of segment. And then I think the Panthers will start 0-2, and so in that regard, I think the Panthers, you don't really need to really hit the panic button for them. We knew this was a little bit of a rebuilding year for the Panthers anyway. So if I'm a Panthers fan, I don't do anything too drastic right now. I think, you just kind of wait it out. Hopefully if this season doesn't turn out the way you want it to be, if they, get a high draft pick, it is what it is. And you just keep building this thing years on end, and just keep building it with Bryce Young at the helm. Let's move on to the Browns versus Steelers game. I do think the Browns probably win in this one. So in the same situation where I think the Steelers probably end up 0-2 here, Browns 2-0 moving forward. This is a game in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, divisional matchups like these two on this Monday night, football, they're weird, but I think the Browns are just one of those teams where, and I said it earlier in the offseason to some friends of mine, I think if the Browns can get even 80% of what Deshaun Watson used to be when he was with the Texans, that this was going to be a decent season for the Browns. The Browns defense is very good. Myles Garrett is very good. Zadarius Smith, they brought over from the Vikings this past offseason. I think he's a great addition there. Dalvin Tomlinson in the middle there is a nice little piece for them in the defensive tackle room. And then their corners are good. Their safeties are good. They have decent linebacker play. I think the Browns are going to be a pain in the rear for everybody in the AFC that they have to play this year. And I think they're probably going to get the job done on Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 0-2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If this is, obviously what happens, I don't think you really hit the panic button just yet because you have Mike Tomlin. And Mike Tomlin is a guy that usually figures things out by the end of the season, and he's going to very rarely, obviously he's got a crazy streak of going at least 500 or better as a head coach. And so I think they'll probably figure some things out as the season progresses, and the Steelers will probably end up being fine. The Deontay Johnson injury does kind of sting a little bit right now, but I think they will find a way. The defense is going to miss Cam Hayward. That's another reason why I don't like them tonight against the Browns. I think the Browns obviously can run the ball quite well with Nick Chubb, and I think that's what they're going to expose tonight in Pittsburgh. And so I think that's the way those are going to go there. Now let's move on to the teams that we actually really know that are 0-2, and should we start hitting the panic button on some of these teams? And I'm going to start with the Vikings. Obviously, Eagles versus Vikings, Thursday Night Football. I went to that game live in Philadelphia. It was an incredible game to go to. I've been very lucky the last two matchups that I've went up there for the home opener that they have won against the Vikings. Monday Night Football last year, Thursday Night Football this year. Well, for the Eagles, it was a very good game last year. I mean, it was kind of a routing. It ended up being 24-7, I believe, at the end of the day on that one. And then this time it was 34-28. It was one of those games where it was a little weird. Both teams came out a little bit sloppy, and then the Eagles kind of got into a little bit of the rhythm. They went up 27-7 at one point, but then kind of let the Vikings claw back in. It felt like the Eagles were kind of in control after that 27-7 lead, and they just kind of assumed that they could just let the clock run out more or less, and the Vikings kept scrapping away and kept trying to win, obviously. And they made a decent effort at the end to get it done, but the Eagles pulled it out. Basically, the Eagles' defense right now is a little bit banged up. There's a lot of injuries going on there. Our defensive line is really bailing us out right now. Defensive line is incredible. Jalen Carter looks great. Jordan Davis looks great. Josh Sweat is already having a great season. We haven't even really heard anything from Hassan Reddick just yet this season, and I mean, he obviously ended the year last year with like 16.5 sacks, so I think his time is coming, obviously. But Eagles offense has looked pretty sloppy this year. New offensive coordinator in Brian Johnson. I don't know if it's one of those situations where he's a first-time guy and he's trying to figure out the lay of the land, essentially, or if he just doesn't have very good feel for play calling in general. Obviously, as an Eagles fan, I'm hoping that he kind of rounds himself into form by the end of the season and we're going to be fine. But I will give him credit during this game, the Thursday Night Football game. He did kind of transition into that run game, and we just mowed down the Vikings defensive line and front seven in general. They couldn't handle our offensive line and DeAndre Swift. He ran for 175 and a touchdown, which the Eagles haven't done something that impressive in the run game since LaShawn McCoy was here, and that was the last time that he did that was the Snow Bowl. That was in like 2010 or something, I believe. No, a little bit. 2013, I think, actually. But anyways, basically, panic button wise for the 0-2 Minnesota Vikings, I don't think you hit it just yet. The defense I thought was going to be a little bit better this year. It seems to be just about the same as it was last year. The offense, there's just very little run game to work with there. Alexander Mattison taking over for Dalvin Cook in the run game, and he hasn't really shown any real flashes of being an impressive player thus far that can kind of take the full workload. So the run game's a little suspect. I think the passing game's going to be fine. Kirk Cousins can find open receivers, and it looks like Kevin O'Connell can figure out ways to get his guys open, especially Justin Jefferson, probably the best wide receiver in all of football. Jordan Addison, a rookie, he has looked pretty good in the first two games. He's made some rookie mistakes like they always do, but when it comes down to it, he makes plays, and I think he'll just get better as the season progresses as well. So I don't think you hit the panic button just yet on the Minnesota Vikings, because this division, I think, is going to come down to the wire between probably the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings. The Vikings just got to get back on track here. Next game, the 0-2 Bengals lose to the Ravens, who are 2-0. So the Bengals, 0-2, I refuse to hit the panic button on a Bengals team with this much talent. They started out slow last year. That is mostly the reason for my lack of concern here, is the fact that a lot of the years the Bengals have gotten off to a slow start with Joe Burrow as the quarterback, and I think this is just one of those situations where not a lot of practice in training camp for Joe Burrow, not a lot of timing and chemistry things that could have transpired as he was dealing with that calf injury. Now, I'm hearing rumblings that maybe he tweaked his calf again in this game, and that would be a huge blow if he's having to deal with that pretty much all season, which, we all knew was a possibility when it happened in training camp, but that would be really tough for him if he has to deal with that all season long. But like I said, I do not think I need to go ahead and hit the panic button on the Bengals just yet. The Ravens didn't look good in week one. They looked a lot better this week. Lamar is really starting to settle into that, passing game with Todd Monken as a offensive coordinator there. So I think this is a situation where you just got to hold on tight if you're a Bengals fan and just kind of wait out this situation. I mean, it's not great that you drop a division matchup in week 2 and you go down 0-2, but it is what it is. Next game, we're going to go 0-2 Bears. They lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, I think it is actually time to really start hitting the panic button if you are a Bears fan, if you're the Bears organization, because mostly of what we have seen thus far from Justin Fields, everybody thinks, or thought before the season that he was going to take the Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen type leap in, year 2, year 3, whatever it may be. And it just has not really transpired just yet. I don't think it's going to. I'm not a huge Justin Fields believer, really. He's got some talent. Obviously, he can really run. His throwing motion's a little bit inconsistent. I think that's probably what's going to hold him back. He has a not great pocket presence right this second. He holds the ball a little bit too long. And, I mean, he's a great runner, so I don't know why he doesn't get through his first or second read and just get out of there. That's what he really should be doing. If he doesn't see the first 1 or 2 guys open, I think you got to make something out of the play and just get out of the pocket. But yeah, I just think it's the Bears have not played well these first 2 weeks, losing to a Buccaneers team, which looks like their defense is better than people expected. Their offense is much better than people expected with Baker Mayfield as the quarterback there. So I don't know if you take a lot of shame in losing to a Buccaneers team at all. I think they look to be solid in that NFC South, but the problem is the Bears just offensively have not looked good. The Bears defense is still not very good. They just need a lot more talent, and they just don't have it right this second. So Bears, I would hit the panic button a little bit here. But moving on, we are going to go to the 0-2 Chargers. They lose this matchup against the Titans here, and it's a tough one. Obviously, this is back-to-back weeks that the Chargers are getting into basically like shootouts, back and forth game, scoring points with another team and losing in the end. Tua and the Dolphins just chopped up that Chargers defense last week, and then this week, a Titans offense that looked terrible in week 1 was able to do pretty much whatever they wanted, essentially, with the Chargers defense in week 2 here, and that is just a bad omen when your head coach is a defensive-minded guy like Brandon Staley. That is just not good, and so I think you kind of have to start hitting the panic button here, and this is mostly a Brandon Staley take for me. I think he's got to go. I think he was so good with the Rams all those years as defensive coordinator, and then he gets a head coaching job, and their defense has not been good one time since he's been there, and it's just, you can't let Justin Herbert keep scoring all these points and lose games. Like, he is doing everything for the most part in his power to get them wins, and the defense is just letting up, tons of points. And like I said, to a team whose offense struggled in week 1 like the Titans made just enough plays in this game to get it done. They're a scrappy team. Mike Vrabel's got a very well coached team there because he knows situationally what to do. He's just a smart guy, so they are scrappy. They're just going to be a gritty squad all season. They're going to be a pain in the butt for everybody this season, the Titans, I should say. And they got it done against the Chargers here in, the last few seconds there and just kick a field goal. So shout out to the Titans for just being gritty and scrapping through a win. Chargers hit the panic button a little bit, mostly because of Brandon Staley, not because of Justin Herbert and the offense. That looked good yesterday. So, let's just move on. 0-2 Cardinals. This is to really be expected. The problem is yesterday was the fashion in which they let the Giants come back in that game. They were up 20-0 at half, and then at one point in the third quarter, 28-7. Let them come all the way back, and I think win 31-28. It's just a disaster over there. I was upset as an Eagles fan, obviously, in a division where you want all your division rivals to kind of drop games they probably shouldn't. I was really rooting for the Cardinals there. But the thing is, honestly, it's kind of a win-win for me. Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles last year, who I credit the most for our loss in the Super Bowl, for not getting one singular stop on Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He's the head coach, obviously, of the Cardinals now, and I take joy in watching his team blow leads because that's essentially what he allowed to happen to us in the Super Bowl last year. So it is what it is. Cardinals are going to be bad. They're essentially tanking anyway, so this loss doesn't really do anything for their fan base or their organization in general. This just puts them one step closer to Caleb Williams, who looks incredibly special. So I think they're going after that, and it just is what it is. Cardinals look bad. Giants really actually look bad themselves, but they were able to claw their way back into this game because Jonathan Gannon just kind of frankly stinks at his job. So Giants not looking too hot, obviously. Before the game, everybody was, talking about how many quarters consecutively the Giants have just refused to score, essentially, to start a season. Obviously, they lost 40-0 in week 1 against the Cowboys, and it did not look good in the first half against the Cardinals. So my predictions for the Giants missing the playoffs and winning like 5 or 6 games looking pretty good so far, because they have not looked good at all. Just a lot of garbage time going on there, obviously, in Arizona, but they were able to claw back in because the Cardinals stink. And honestly, I wouldn't doubt if the owner called in to Jonathan Gannon around halftime, was like, hey, man, I thought we were going to lose all these games because we're trying to get Caleb Williams, and that's a fact. So pretty much that's it for that game. Let's move on to the 0-2 Broncos. They played the Commanders on Sunday, and I thought really the Broncos were going to run away with this thing. They had a significant lead at one point, and the Broncos have really fought back-to-back weeks. 2 tough games. They lost to the Raiders week 1, lost to the Commanders obviously this week, and I think it's really just the Broncos don't really have a whole lot of consistency going on. It looks like Russell Wilson looks a little bit better than he did last year. He's throwing the deep ball again, and it looks like it's accurate again, so that's a good sign moving forward. An 0-2 start is not good for a team that is in a gauntlet of a division like the AFC West. And so I think they're probably going to struggle to make the playoffs here. So I think I would hit the panic button on them just a little bit. Sean Payton, I thought, was going to have a little bit more, juice going into this season with the team and really change some things. But Russell Wilson looks, marginally better than he did last year. But that's not saying a lot considering how bad he was last year. So hit the panic button a little bit on the Broncos. They can probably make a little bit of a comeback here. But like I said, I think it's a division that's probably going to run away from teams that start out 0-2. Next game, 0-2 Texans. They played the Colts, a division rival, obviously. And if this is a tough one, because you don't want to hit the panic button on the quarterback or the offense or really the organization. You just got to kind of hit the panic button on this season in particular. They're just not going to win a lot of games this season, and that's just the reality of the situation. But what I will say is CJ Stroud has looked great in the first 2 games of the season. You got to be really encouraged if you're a Texans fan, if you're the organization, watching what he's doing. He's thrown, I think, just 1 interception thus far. I thought I was going to get away with a really sneaky play in fantasy this week and start the Colts defense against CJ Stroud, and he scored a decent amount of points on the Colts defense. I mean, this was, of course, after Anthony Richardson did leave with a concussion, so the offense kind of stalled a little bit more in the second half with the Colts there on offense, but still, CJ Stroud has looked good. I think you have your guy for the future. So that's something very positive to take away from this, even though the season's probably not going to go the way you want it to if you're a Texans fan. Having your quarterback for the future is such a huge deal. And on the flip side of that, man, the Colts, I think Anthony Richardson looks great. Obviously, he's gotten banged up already in back-to-back weeks, kind of hurt his knee at the end of week 1 and gets a concussion running for his second touchdown on the ground in this game. But he looked great to start the game, and they jumped out to a huge lead, which Gardner Minshew was able to just kind of maintain and manage for the rest of the game. So shout out to him as well. Shane Steichen doing a great job, I think, early on here with the way he's kind of displaying Anthony Richardson and getting him in rhythm and stuff like that. So Shane Steichen, a guy that the Eagles, I think, are missing right now, like I was talking to earlier about how Brian Johnson's the new offensive coordinator there, unlike the Cardinals, who the Eagles are not missing right now on defense because Sean Desai is doing a great job in Philadelphia right now as DC. But let me get back to this. Basically, that's pretty much all I really had to say about the Texans and the Colts. Colts win a divisional matchup that I think they really needed to get under their belt to really try to compete in that South division. So let's move on to the next 0-2 team, and the last one which is the 0-2 Patriots, who played the Dolphins last night on Sunday Night Football. That was a good game. Honestly, the Patriots have fought really hard in both of their both their games this season so far. Week 1 against the Eagles, they scrapped and clawed, almost came back to win that game if basically Josh Jobe doesn't push Kayshon Boutte out of bounds on that last pass play there. They probably get in position and score that touchdown and probably win that game because the Eagles defense at that point was kind of reeling a little bit. And then week 2, I mean, they scrapped and clawed with the Dolphins. They had a few mistakes here and there. Mac Jones, the one basically where it looked like they were driving and then he tosses the ball up to, I think it was Devontae Parker, and Xavier Howard just takes the ball away from him. That was a huge one. And then the Dolphins, I mean, they went 3 and out after that, but then it gave them a little bit more momentum. And so the Dolphins cap it off. Dolphins are 2-0. Patriots 0-2. Obviously, not a good start for the Patriots team that wanted to compete in this division, which I think is once again going to be another tough one. I mean, obviously, it's going to be Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills to kind of like fend for themselves in that one. I thought obviously the Jets were really going to be in contention this year with Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, the injury to him is such a huge blow, and so the Jets are, I think, probably going to be out of it very soon. Just Zach Wilson just can't get it done, really. Looked pretty shaky yesterday against the Cowboys. So looks like it's going to be the Dolphins and Bills division to lose. Patriots start out 0-2. I don't think you really hit the panic button here. I think they can. It's one division game that they've dropped, and that's not the worst thing in the world because usually that AFC East division beats up on each other. So it is what it is. I do like the Patriots still. I don't want to give up on a Mac Jones. The weapons are just not very good for the Patriots in general. The defense is phenomenal. Bill Belichick calling his rear off on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's doing a great job there. But yeah, I don't think he hit the panic button on the Patriots in general, but it's a tough 0-2 start for them. All right, so now we're going to move on to the 2-0 teams, and I'm going to decide if these guys are for real or if they're frauds. And honestly, I haven't really thought too much about these, but I'm going to start with the Saints here, who I think obviously are going to end up being 2-0 after tonight. And I got to say, I think they're probably going to be for real. I think that division in the NFC South is going to come down to the Falcons and the Saints probably. The Buccaneers are 2-0 too, so I'll get to that later. But the Saints, I think they're going to end up being 2-0 here. Panthers are going to be at the bottom of that division, and then it's going to be a kind of a 3-team fight there. But the Saints look good in week 1. They almost lost to a Titans team. Like I said, that their offense didn't look too good, but I think the Saints defense will round into form. I think the offense will round into form as they get Kamara back on offense from suspension, and there's more chemistry to go around with Derek Carr and Chris Olave and Mike Thomas and Rashid Shaheed. They have a good offense right there. Jawan Johnson. They got players, and so I think by the end of the season, they're going to be a good team. So I think they're for real. Next team, Browns. Like I said, I think they're going to win tonight. I think they'll end up being 2-0 after the Monday Night Football game against the Steelers. And I think the Browns, like I said, I think they're for real as well. I don't know if I'm going to pick them to be in Super Bowl contention anytime soon. But like I said, they're going to be a pain in the rear for every team. Their defense is good. Deshaun Watson, I think, can do just enough. They have good weapons on offense. Their running game is phenomenal. Their offensive line is phenomenal. So I think they can be a pain in the rear. They are for real as well. Next, Eagles, 2-0 as well. And I'm biased. I'm not going to lie. I think they're still for real. They do have to get some injuries fixed. They have to get some communication issues on defense fixed. And their passing game has to get going. But they can survive early on in the season with the run game and trying to get everything back into shape. But their roster is just too good for them not to be for real. I mean, obviously, they made the Super Bowl last year. And yes, they've lost some people here and there, but there's been a lot of good replacements thus far. And people are stepping up in spots that I thought that maybe there would be a lot of lacking. But the defense does have some holes at linebacker, obviously. Nakobe Dean going on the IR. We have some injuries at cornerback now. Avonte Maddox looks like he's going to be out for the entire season with a torn pec potentially. So we have some holes to fill injury-wise, but I think as the season progresses, Sean Desai will figure out a way to kind of manipulate that defense to make them better than they probably are. And that D-line, like I said, is dominant for the Eagles, so I think that's going to translate all season long. I think the offense is just going to take some time. They're going to round into form, and they will be fine. I think they're for real as well. Falcons, they are 2-0. Like I said before, I think it's probably going to be a 3-team race in the NFC South there with the Saints and the Falcons and the Buccaneers. What I think, do I think the Falcons are for real or frauds? I'm going to say for real, because I think that run game can take them a long ways, and their defense is much better than people expect them to be. The Packers were able to move the ball on them a little bit yesterday. Jordan Love actually looked pretty good against them, but I do think the Falcons defense, with the addition of Jesse Bates, they got A.J. Terrell back. Grady Jarrett's a great player inside. I think they can make some plays on defense and on offense. If they ever get a lead, man, they can just run the ball down your throat. That offensive line is good. They have a lot of good players there, and Bijan Robinson looks incredible. Tyler Algier is incredibly consistent, and you just know what you're going to get out of him. You're going to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust essentially from him every single play. He's never going to fall backwards essentially. But Bijan Robinson looks absolutely special. Drake London is a good talent as long as Desmond Ridder can get him the ball. They really need to feature Kyle Pitts a little bit more. They spent a huge draft pick on him, and I think they need to utilize his skill set a little bit more. It looks like they were featuring Jonnu Smith a little bit more than him yesterday, and that was just mind-boggling to me, really. But I think the Falcons are for real because they have portions of their team that are like the strengths of their team are things that can translate all the way through to playoff time. So I think they're a for real team. Now, next we have the Ravens. The Ravens, I think, also are for real. I think as the season goes on, Lamar Jackson is going to get more and more comfortable in that system with Todd Monken, that new passing scheme. And I think they have the weapons. Obviously, Odell Beckham does leave yesterday with an ankle injury. That's unfortunate, but Zay Flowers is a very good player. Mark Andrews is obviously going to be a nice safety blanket, security blanket for Lamar Jackson moving forward. The run game can get it done for the Ravens. They have the combination of Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. That's kind of like the thunder and lightning kind of thing that you kind of want in your backfield. And so I think they can get it done. The defense, I think, is pretty solid, and they look good against the Bengals. Bengals are a little bit out of sorts, obviously, these first 2 weeks of the season. So we'll see going forward, but I think the Ravens are for real as well. Next team, Buccaneers. They are 2-0, and I think that they are probably, I'm going to lean fraudulent. And the only reason I say that is just their competition the first 2 weeks has not been super great. But I will give them credit for winning the 2 games, obviously. The defense is better than people think. They got speed at linebacker, Levante David, Devin White, good players, obviously. D-line, still very good. Shaquille Barrett had an incredible play yesterday, intercepting a screen pass from Justin Fields and taking it to the house, which was only like 5 yards. But anyways, they have Vita Vea, still a very good player on that defensive line. I think they have Akeem Hicks as well. The back end, they have Carlton Davis. They got good players still. Antoine Winfield Jr. And so that defense, I think, is going to continue to be good all season. It's just, is this the real Baker Mayfield we're going to get all season long? He has proven to start out seasons pretty decent, and as the season progresses, he kind of falls off the cliff a little bit. And I think this is probably going to be a different situation for him because he actually has real weapons on offense. The running game concerns me a little bit with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It looks like you're not getting a whole lot from Rachaad White, not very efficient on the ground. But I will say Mike Evans has looked great. Chris Godwin is still a good football player, so I think they're going to be fine on offense going forward. Defense, I think, is going to be consistent. But I don't know if the 2-0 is going to translate to running away with the NFC South anytime soon. So I think they're slightly fraudulent, but I can definitely flip the switch on that very soon if they continue to prove to me that they're for real. So moving on, we're going to do 49ers. 49ers, easily for real. They look incredible thus far in the season. They've been dominating teams that they play. They didn't necessarily dominate yesterday, but it was a very good offensive showing. It's not like they really slowed up any. The defense looked like it was a little bit less dominant than in week 1 when they were just mollywhopping the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Rams offense looked pretty good against them. And let me shout out Matthew Stafford. He has looked like the best quarterback in football the first 2 weeks. I know he lost the game, and I know he threw like 2 picks. One of them wasn't his fault, but he's trying to make things happen with a group of skill players that nobody would expect anybody to make plays with. I mean, he's got guys out there, Tutu Atwell playing well. He's got Puka Nacua playing great football right now, setting records and receptions in his first 2 games of a career ever. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is out, and when he gets back, the offense is going to be a whole different, animal. If he ever does get back, I hope he does. But yeah, dude, they look good. Like I said, though, the 49ers look legit. Defense is legit. The offense, Brock Purdy's just facilitating out there to his playmakers, and they're making plays right now. Christian McCaffrey looks unbelievable. So 49ers, definitely for real. Next team, Cowboys, definitely for real as well. They have dominated the first 2 weeks of the season. Defense looks basically unstoppable. Micah Parsons is the scariest human on the planet, apparently, and he is making plays everywhere. He's reading everything perfectly, and he is getting after the quarterback, and that's going to be really tough to stop going forward, especially with the addition of like a Stephon Gilmore on the backside to help out Trevon Diggs in the secondary. They're a scary duo because if you got pressure in your face and you have to make a quick decision on offense, throw a football where you probably didn't want to in the first place because you have Micah Parsons breathing down your neck or DeMarcus Lawrence breathing down your neck, then somebody like a Trevon Diggs or a Stephon Gilmore can break on a ball and take a pick to the house. So that defense is going to be good moving forward. I don't see it dropping off really. And then it's just going to be a matter of if Dak Prescott can, just rein it in and not make too many mistakes and just kind of manage a game, because all he has to do is hand the ball off to Tony Pollard, get the ball out to CeeDee Lamb a few times, and they will win a ton of football games this season. My prediction that the Eagles will win the division is looking a little bit suspect at this point, considering how good the Cowboys have looked. So I don't see any of the other 2 teams winning the division necessarily, but it looks like Eagles and Cowboys are the 2 teams at the top of the NFC East right now, and it looks like the Cowboys should be the favorite right this second. Moving on, we have the Commanders. They are 2-0, another team in the NFC East. Like I said, not a huge believer in them when it comes to winning the NFC East, but I will say that I think the Commanders thus far are a little bit fraudulent, but I can kind of like with the Buccaneers, I can be convinced otherwise. It looks like in years past, there are situations and parts of the first 2 weeks where the Commanders in years before and years past would have absolutely just laid down and died. Week 1 against the Cardinals did not look good. They almost lost to a Cardinals team that didn't score an offensive touchdown in week 1, so that would have been really embarrassing, but they pulled it out. Playing a Broncos team in week 2, and they were down quite a bit. They clawed their way back in, and I think I got to give credit to Eric Bieniemy on this one. I think he's a guy that has inspired this offense that when things start going wrong, that is not the end of the day, that they can get back in these games, and that's proven to be the case in both their first 2 games. I just don't know how that's going to last all season long. I don't know talent level, what we're going to actually get from Sam Howell all season long as well. He's got weapons on offense, and I think they're going to utilize them well, but they've got to prove it to me. I think they're slightly fraudulent, but like I said, I can be convinced that they can potentially be for real moving forward. Next team, last team 2-0, the Dolphins. Obviously, they looked good last night, and they looked good in week 1. The defense looked a little lackluster in week 1 against the Chargers, but last night against the Patriots, the defense stepped up and they stopped, more or less, they stopped Ramondre Stevenson from completely destroying that game for them. And so I think the Dolphins, if they can continue to get their defense to play like that, wait around until Jalen Ramsey's able to get back on that field for them and make that defense just that much more dominant, I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with. I think the Dolphins can definitely win the AFC East. That offense looks good, man. I mean, there's mistakes that have been made by the Dolphins, but they're just so good on offense that I think they can come back from almost any kind of setback in a game. Just too explosive, man. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert so fast, and they're still waiting on Jeff Wilson to get back from the IR. So That team moving forward is going to be very good, and I don't see them really taking a huge drop off in production anytime soon. So Dolphins 2-0, definitely for real. All right, let's basically I've done the 0-2 thing, I've done the 2-0 thing. So what we're gonna do is just jump into a few of the other games that I didn't get to. Bills versus Raiders. Man, I got completely fooled on this one. I put out a parlay that I liked, and I had the Raiders +9. Absolute trap. Buffalo Bills home opener. Should have known. They smoked the Raiders. The Raiders secondary is very, very bad, and Josh Allen and them were able to exploit that basically. James Cook had a good game as well. Looks like he's getting a lot of his touches poached at the goal line by the likes of Latavius Murray and Damian Harris. So if you're a fantasy manager, you're a little upset about that stuff. But in totality, the offense definitely bounced back after a bad game against the Jets. Josh Allen looked like he wasn't exactly as wild west, just gunslinging everywhere in this week 2 matchup against the Raiders. So if he can just hone it back in like that, they're going to be fine moving forward, and it's going to be them and the Dolphins for the AFC East. And I expect them to be kind of in the playoff picture at the very least. Next game, Seahawks versus the Lions. This was a great game, very back and forth. And the Seahawks get it done in overtime with the first possession there, going and throwing the ball to Tyler Lockett, which I appreciated due to my fantasy team. But yeah, Seahawks, nice little bounce back after week 1. Week 1 was very disappointing, losing to a Rams team that nobody expected to be good. Obviously, Matthew Stafford kind of cooked them up, and the defense for the Rams is better than people expect. I mean, there's a lot of just guys out there that I've never heard of, a bunch of undrafted free agents, and they're getting it done on defense. So you got to give a shout out to Raheem Morris over there in Los Angeles. But back to the Seahawks, great bounce back to beat the Lions here. It's huge because obviously it's another NFC matchup. It can be like a tiebreaker type thing at the end of the year where both of these teams are in playoff contention if neither one of them win their respective divisions. And so it's a huge win for the Seahawks. The Lions still looked good. I don't think there's anything to really worry about for the Lions. The Lions defense looked good in week 1 against the Chiefs. In week 2 here, they looked a little less good than they did in week 1. There's still some holes on that Detroit Lions defense that are kind of showing through from what we were seeing last year with the passing, or the secondary, I should say. So I think moving forward, the Detroit Lions will be fine because Jared Goff is still looking very good at quarterback, and that offense has weapons. I think they really need to get Jahmyr Gibbs going again. It looks like he's probably going to have to get going more moving forward with the injury to David Montgomery. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the Lions look like going forward. And the Seahawks, like I said, nice bounce back. They're 1-1 now, so that's good for them. Next game, we have the Chiefs versus Jaguars. The Chiefs bounced back, obviously, after a week 1 loss to the Detroit Lions, and I still don't have a whole lot of confidence in their offense. I think this might be a situation where, because of the lack of weapons on their offense, they have to just kind of stay in games. And it looks like the defense for the Chiefs are going to keep them in these games because the Chiefs' defense completely stifled the Jacksonville Jaguars' offense. Jacksonville looked a little bit sloppy in week 1. I thought that was just kind of like a week 1 deal. But they didn't look great in week 2 at all either. They couldn't really get the ball to their playmakers as much as you'd expect them to. They couldn't really run the ball a whole lot against the Chiefs. The Chiefs getting Chris Jones back was astronomically huge for them. They are just such a better defensive line and defense in general, and Chris Jones is there just wrecking havoc and just causing problems for opposing offensive lines and quarterbacks. And so moving forward, Chris Jones is going to be a big deal. I think this might be a season where you see the Chiefs, their defense kind of carry them a little bit more, and then Pat Mahomes just make some magic happen at the end of games to kind of cap off some wins. Because with the lack of talent on offense for the Chiefs, I don't know what they're going to do moving forward. But each one of these teams is now 1-1, and so that's pretty much all I have for the Week 2 recap. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Sorry, like I said earlier, I apologize for the technical difficulties for not getting a podcast out week 1, but I'm looking forward to this season. It is looking like it's starting off really interesting. A lot of weird stuff going on, but it is early. The first 4 games are almost like the preseason for these teams that don't play a lot of their players in week 1. So a lot of stuff to feel out here. A lot of teams that are out of it but can get back in it, and I'm excited for the rest of the season. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and please follow me on TikTok and on YouTube. That is the biggest thing. Is please subscribe, put on those notification bells so you can know when I post some stuff, and obviously follow on Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever you may have. I appreciate you guys tuning in once again, and we will talk to you next week. See ya.